Okay, we're going to start. Shalom Aleichem. My name is Elisha Brook. I run the Shayach program here at Nefesh B'Nefesh. Today's webinar is going to be focused on communities, hearing the different options, exploring different ideas that could be a good fit for families making Aliyah. We have with us today on the webinar Yona Kaufman, a longtime resident of Ramat Beit Shemesh. Yona has been in Ramat Beit Shemesh a quarter of a century, so we're going to get a lot of perspective, experience, to hear how Ramat Beit Shemesh developed and what's available. Yona also serves on the City Council of Beit Shemesh. He heads the portfolio for Aliyah and Klita, so we're going to get a perspective of that as well. And we also have with us here Yoel Berman, author of the book Living in the Land, the forum, a very popular forum about questions for people living in Israel, moving to Israel, Avira Eretz Yisroel. And it is a pleasure to have you both with us. So we're going to start in a minute and hear your perspectives. Before we begin, we just want to remind our viewers, as always, Aliyah is a complicated question. There's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different parts that go into it. So we recommend you do a good research, ask the questions, speak to many people, speak to your Rav, make sure your family's on board, take your time, no rush. You want to plan it well, you want to do it well. So let's keep that in mind in the background. And as I said, today's webinar is going to be focused specifically on communities. We're going to go through different communities. We're going to discuss Ramat Beit Shemesh, but we just want to remind our viewers there are no good cities and bad cities in Eretz Yisrael. Every city is a great city. It's all wonderful. They're all great options. It really depends on your personal circumstance. For some people, Yerushalayim is a wonderful option. For some people, Ramat Beit Shemesh is a great option. For others, it can be Afula or Ashdod or Ashkelon. There are many great cities out there. We're going to share the information, and then you can take that on and continue the research at a later point, or you can reach out to us and we're happy to continue guiding you. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into this. Today's webinar is going to share specifically what is it about Ramat Beit Shemesh that people keep moving there. And we see large numbers of Olim that are moving to Ramat Beit Shemesh. So I'm going to start with the typical question that we get asked all the time by a family, whether from Monsey or Lakewood or Passaic, wherever they're coming from. And they ask, why is it that everyone seems to be moving to Ramat Beit Shemesh? My uncle told me, my brother told me, are there any other cities that we can move to aside to Ramat Beit Shemesh? So Yona, I want to start with you. What is it about Ramat Beit Shemesh that people keep saying, oh, I'm only moving to Ramat Beit Shemesh, and my brother told me that that's where I should move, and my cousin told me. Well, what is it about it? What are people seeing over there?
Okay, that's a very good question. So I always tell people, come and see for yourselves. I think it's the diversified communities, and I really think there's a community or Ramat Beit Shemesh for basically everyone. Every type of person, whatever stage they're at, and their family's at, there's a community that is, that is appropriate for them. And I think that's where Ramat Beit Shemesh has become.
So Yona, I'm just gonna, continue to harp a little bit on what you said. That is what has become. What was it different in the past? Meaning people that have looked into Ramat Beit Shemesh 20 years ago or 10 years ago now are saying, oh, but now my cousin just moved there last year. What do you mean by it has become?
So in the beginning, Beit Shemesh started off as a town for immigrants that were coming over from West Africa. There was one group of Ashkenazi Jews that came from Romania that settled in Beit Shemesh. There was the Romanian Shul, which still exists. It became a Sephardi Shul now because there wasn't enough people there in Old Beit Shemesh. And when Ramat Beit Shemesh opened up, there was a group of Americans and Anglos that started moving there. And the first 2 or 3 shuls that opened up were Anglo. And slowly but steadily was always, growing in numbers of Anglos. And I would say in the past decade, it has exploded. And it is the place where most of the Americans, or North Americans, and not just though. I know we're discussing English-speaking North America today, but we have a ton of immigrants, new immigrants from France, from South America, and it has become the place.
Right. So Yoel, I want to pose it to you in the follow-up question that people always ask us, and that is, okay, so you're saying Ramat Beit Shemesh has the diversity and it has all the Anglos moving over there. Are there any other options? in terms of the diversity or Anglos moving over there? Obviously not in the same numbers of Ramat Beit Shemesh and what Ramat Beit Shemesh has to offer, but what other options can people look into?
So it really depends what you're looking for. The other options that exist outside of Beit Shemesh, just by virtue of the fact that the much smaller communities, especially from the, especially Anglo-wise, in other words, there are not going to be a lot of Anglos in these other places outside of Yerushalayim and Beit Shemesh. And so the challenges are different, but they do exist. There's a handful in all sorts of places. You can find in Sefas, in Afula, in Fakim, in Ma'ale Amos, all sorts of places all over the country. You can find a handful of Anglos. It'll be different percentages. Sometimes it'll be, just a few families, and sometimes it'll be a lot more, in a more significant percentage. But you won't really find a kahila of Anglos. That's very rare outside of Beit Shemesh. I mean, in Afula, there's an attempt to do that, so there's something like that now. But mostly it's going to be a place where Anglos can feel comfortable in a general kahila, which includes also Israelis.
Mm-hmm. I want to focus on the point that Yona mentioned. Okay, Yona mentioned the idea of diversity. Can you share with us another community that would also have diversity in terms of a little bit different hashkafas, different backgrounds where people are coming from? Because a lot of the olim that come, people say, we don't want all of us to be wearing the same exact uniform every day, all the time. We want a little bit more colors. Would there be another community outside of Ramat Beit Shemesh?
Yes, I wouldn't want to speak for Beit Shemesh, but just like you said, to compare and contrast. So I would assume that Beit Shemesh, because there's so many Anglos there, so every subgroup and every group with a bit of a different hashkafa, they have the capacity, they have the ability to create their own cheder school to serve their needs. And in general, I would say that in a lot of the other places, it's similar to what you'd have in American out of town as well, where the range of hashkafas within one community would be a lot wider. That's the experience that I've come across. Though in some places there is an attempt to make separate schooling, separate kahilas, also for people from a bit of different backgrounds. Carmiel is one example. That several years ago there was one main school that served the people from backgrounds that came there. They would mainstream into the regular school there, and this is development over the past few years, and now there are actually two different schools there that serve the general from Kehila there, and even a more Israeli style Haredi in addition to those two that also opened up. So you do have that. So like on the one hand, in the small communities, you can have diversity within the Kehila, and on the other hand, you also might have some places where they actually split off into different sub-Kehilas.
That's actually very interesting. What you're saying is that Carmiel, although it's a little bit more north, I don't think it's in Lebanon, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's further up. But it has that diversity that Yona mentioned that there is in Ramat Beit Shemesh that draws many olim over there. But in fact, it exists in another place in Israel as well, a community of Anglos with diversity in different schools. So Yona, I want to follow up on what Yoel said about having different kind of schools. Can you share with us a little bit what the schools look like in Ramat Beit Shemesh and the way they were set up in the past and what's available today for a family looking to move there?
So Baruch Hashem, the community growing, the schools are also growing, and some of them are bursting at their seams. As part of my job in the city, it was just trying to make sure all the schools have physical space to open up this year. And it was a challenge, and Baruch Hashem, mostly successful. We have, I would say, for the Anglo community moving in, we have a very wide range of schools for boys and for girls. Grade school and high schools, as well as yeshiva ktanas or yeshiva high schools. Yeshiva gdolas less, but those already are there. There's many and plenty of them in Beit Shemesh. Sorry, in Eretz Yisrael. Specifically, what you have a more specific question, or just the range of schools?
So the challenge is, and that families moving into different communities, and they ask for, the question is, we want to move into a community, let's say to Ramat Beit Shemesh, what does the school system look like in terms of our children feeling comfortable, in terms of resources available for Olim, in terms of Ulpan, in terms of them integrating well?
Okay, so the process is like this. We get a list, and really, you guys from Shayach are really good at sending over the list of which families are coming. And here in the city, our representatives of the city workers who work in the Klita office of the city of Beit Shemesh are in touch with each family. Now, it's important for the families to speak to these representatives, right? We're here to help, not to hinder. And the most important thing for a family making Aliyah is the chinuch, is to make sure. People think that it's parnasa, that's number two. If the children are in the right schools and the chinuch is happening, then the family will be successful. And if not, it can be terrible. So therefore, we reach out to every family, and our representatives understand what the schools are like here. We know the schools very well, who would accept who, where it's good to go for. When a person tells me, okay, I'm Haredi. So when in America he tells me he's Haredi per se, say, okay, what does that mean being Haredi? Well, tell me which community, which shul do you daven? I can say, okay, so here you might be considered American Haredi. Here you might be considered this. Here you might consider that. And if you want a school which is going to be suitable for you, for your children, these might be the options. And they might have heard of a different school. I'll say, well, that school is not Haredi, and that's also a good school. But it's really, we try and explain to them, we don't just make decisions for them. We explain to them, if you're looking for this, then these are your options. If you're looking for that, then the other ones are your options. We work with the schools to make sure the kids are registered in them and that they're accepted into the schools. As far as Ulpan, we have an Ulpan program for all the kids coming in, which is basically done in the schools. Now, certain schools work very well with us, and other schools are not good with working with us, with the city, with those programs. So if that's an important factor, then we want to make sure that the new Olim are going to the schools which have the programs, because that's part of the success of the kids and the chinuch, is that they adapt and learn the language most of the time, 90% of the time, much better than the parents, and they adapt very fast.
So, Yona, I'm going to follow with you in terms of the school system. It's set up, and this is probably a big factor why many families want to come there, because you have all that services and experience with the schools, and it's all set up. We hear all the time, Ramat Beit Shemesh is expanding. And I think that term is becoming, we're becoming immune to it, because it's constantly expanding. Soon it's going to get down to Egypt. It's all over the place. It's busting the seams. Do we see that kind of service also being offered in the newer neighborhoods? Or Olim who are thinking of moving a little bit to the newer Ramat Beit Shemesh, whether it be Dalit, or whether it be Hey, or Zayin Ches, whatever is up and coming, what does the service look like for them? Are there schools there yet? Do they bus into the other neighborhoods? What does that look like?
Okay, so let's Ramat Beit Shemesh Dalit, which is by far the biggest neighborhood. I would say over there, they do not yet have the schools for Olim like the rest of Ramat Beit Shemesh. Ramat Beit Shemesh Hey does. The schools that are just starting off there they do cater to the Olim. What is currently open in Ramat Beit Shemesh Dalit is a little less for the Olim, and they still have to come, and they come into Aleph or to Gimel or some to Hey now. Ramat Beit Shemesh Vav or Rothstein Heights, that's opening up. That will be mainly Olim from America, and I believe that there will be. We're a few years away from that, but whatever schools will open will be for Olim. So Ramat Beit Shemesh Dalit is not yet that Olim friendly. It is Olim friendly for the pricing, more affordable, more options, and I believe that we will have the schools there also. Currently, I would assume if you're moving to Ramat Beit Shemesh Dalit, then if for Americans, it might not be a big deal, a 10-minute car ride, but in Ramat Beit Shemesh, it's like, wow, yeah, it's far.
Right. The difference in travel is something that the people take into consideration because traveling in America, half an hour or 40 minutes to school, not everyone does it, but some people do it. In Israel, that's not very common. So even if you're traveling within the city for 10 minutes, it's only 10 minutes, relatively compared. Yoel, I wanna take this to a little bit of a different place. You wanna mention affordability, that the outer, newer neighborhoods of Ramat Beit Shemesh are more affordable. But being Ramat Beit Shemesh with the demand that people want to move there, and being that it's close to the center of the country in Yerushalayim, so many people say, I would love to move there. However, affordability is more challenging. So you mentioned before, Carniel, that they're set up in terms of schools, and it's more affordable. What other options can you share with us that would be more affordable for a family making Aliyah?
As far as affordability is concerned, there are a lot more places, but again, you'd have to factor in how many angles are there and how comfortable you'd be there. For example, by far, maybe the most affordable place, exclusively Haredi place, for housing that's with new construction, I would think is something like Emmanuel, which experienced amazing growth over the past couple of years. But again, that's as far as the prices are concerned. There are other factors as well. As far as prices, there's all over. There's Meitzad and Me'ale Amos, which are much closer to Yerushalayim. There's places all over.
But when you say closer to Yerushalayim, half an hour or like an hour and a half?
It could be an hour, or between half an hour to an hour. You have Meitzad and Me'ale Amos, and then things that are much more affordable. It could be an hour and a half, like Emmanuel, Afula, Har Yonah, Nofa Galil.
So these are more affordable options. These more affordable options because they're further away from the country. Does that mean that a family moving there has to buy a car? Because we hear all the time that in Israel, some families say, we moved there and the buses are great. You live in Yerushalayim or you live in Beit Shemesh and other places and there's buses wherever you go and they're constantly there and they keep adding new lines. If someone was to move to one of these further communities, as they're more affordable, does that mean they have to buy a car? Let's say, for example, Afula.
So what I would say is in each of these communities, find out what the people there are doing, including the Israelis. In many of these places, some of them I mentioned, Emmanuel, Afula, Nofa Galil, most of the Israelis do not have cars there. So the infrastructure is set up not to have a car. But if you'll need specific chinuch options, which might not exist exactly where you are, so then you might need a car. Like in Afula, so if you'd be sending to one of the really local places, then you don't need a car. But if you want to send there's a school in Kfar Gidon, so that could be with a car, would make life easier. There still is public transportation, but it's more difficult.
Right. I want to add another layer to this. If we are talking about these communities that are a little further out that do have an Anglo presence, and there are schools, and it sounds like it is an option, would you recommend it in terms of a community where you have a Rav and a Shul, where it's more cohesive, as opposed to just Anglos living in a certain area and it's Anglo friendly? Can you give us an option of a community that has a Shul with a Rav and more of a structure?
Okay, so I would divide that into two. Basically, a lot of these places that are further out from Yerushalayim, so the general Haredi community there is much more cohesive as community. And to somebody that's coming to be a part of them and to integrate with them, so they would have that community feeling. And a lot of those communities, a lot of those kehillas themselves have that feeling, even though like the same kind of people, the same kind of Israelis, if they'd be living in Yerushalayim or Beit Shemesh, they'd just be part of a regular, just be a number. In these places, they're actually part of a community. So that could work for Americans that are coming to integrate. And there is a startup idea of a kehila in Afula elite. They're trying to do this American kehila that's specifically to cater to Americans. But in general, in out of town, it's more about the integrating. Carmiel also, I think, is more integrated. There's like maybe one shul that's mostly American, one little shul, but in general, I think it's in the places outside of Beit Shemesh, it's more about integrating. And integrating doesn't necessarily mean you won't have a Rav. For example, sometimes they'll even have an English-speaking Rav, like Ma'aleh Amos. He has that Kehila idea to it mostly. Recently, with the influx of a lot of Hasidim, so they have their own like sub Kehila there. But the regular from Kehila there, the Rav actually is American. So even though it's an Israeli Kehila per se, but you have an American Rav there, and it's all part of one Kehila. So
Yona, Yona, you want to add something?
I wanted to.
Well,
I wanted to add in general.
They have an American kehillah that was there for many years, right? And they had, they had one shul, but they integrated, like Yoel was saying. In Meitzad, now is bursting at its seams. It was all American originally, and now the Israelis are coming into Meitzad. So I agree. Netanya has an American kehillah, but it's an Anglo kehillah, but it's an older one. So if you want to integrate, then as you all said, it's not that nobody around you will speak English, but realize where you're going to. And if you want to feel at home somewhat like you're used to, then Beit Shemesh is still, or certain places in Yerushalayim are still the option, the best option.
Mm-hmm. I hear hesitation in your voice, Yona, and you started with the hesitation when you mentioned the word integration. So we get all the time the question of, if I move to Ramat Beit Shemesh and I send my kids to those good schools that have more English speakers, and I have a nice shul with a Rav in a community that speaks English, am I perpetually keeping my kids in what we call the American bubble? Am I giving them the option to integrate? And the real concern is, what are they going to look like in 10, 15 years when they grow up? Yona, what does that look like?
So what I would say is that like this. I had friends, right? When we made Aliyah, my parents made Aliyah 30 years ago. I was a kid. And they, of course, spoke English, and we took English lessons, and we spoke English at home to some degree. And I still speak a little English. There was other kids, their parents came and they decided, no, we're going to be Israeli, and we're not going to speak English to the kids, and we're going to send them to schools. We're not going to teach them to read and write. And the kids definitely became a lot more Israeli. They could barely speak to their grandparents. They integrated into the Haredi Israeli society very well. But they didn't words. Those skills weren't available.
You broke off for a minute. What wasn't available?
I apologize. Okay. There's the skills, right? Staying not American in Israel, but to still speak English, right? It's never hurt anybody to speak the English language, to know how to read, to write, right? So those who integrated a long time ago fully, right? They totally became Israeli, and that's a choice, and that's okay. But living in a place like Ramat Beit Shemesh, you have the choice to, yes, be Israeli, learn Hebrew, speak Hebrew, not be a tourist in the land, but also to, we're conversing here in English on this podcast, right? And we all, Baruch Hashem, live here in Eretz Yisroel and feel that we are integrated.
So, if I'm understanding you, it's more like a dial. Like, you can decide to completely integrate more, you can do it less. But today you have more of an option, whereas you can integrate, feel comfortable, but at the same time, you're speaking English, your kids speak English, you have those American schools, you're somewhat in this comfortable integrated zone.
Correct. Yes, 100%. I agree with that.
That seems like a Beit Shemesh phenomena. where you walk down the street, you don't know if the person's going to answer in English or in Hebrew, and they can be fluent in both and feel comfortable. Yoel, do you say that there's another community somewhere in Israel where you have a similar setup, where the environment would be conducive for people to integrate on the one hand, but still maintain a certain sense of, we came from America, we speak English, the culture is a little bit different, but we're comfortable over here.
As of now, I don't know of any place like that, but places might develop like that. I mean, how was Beit Shemesh 20 years ago? I mean, there could be other things coming up, but in general, that's a unique Beit Shemesh phenomenon.
So we can say there are many options for Anglos to move to, but in other cities it would be more of a all-encompassing integration, a lot more of a blunt integration. But Shemesh should be a little bit slower, maybe at steps, or if we can add in a comfort, more of a comfort integration.
Yeah, in these other places, it's a forced integration. Like you're jumping into the pool on the deep end. For some people, that's what helps them learn to swim. But for some people, they need the shallow. So
Right.
everyone.
Like we mentioned in the beginning, there are no good or bad cities. It's just a matter of choosing a city that would be a good integration for you and choosing a nice neighborhood that would work for you and your family. Yona, I want to follow up with what Yoel said before about having a shul and a rav. Yoel, you mentioned about Aliyah, where there's an English speaking rav, and you mentioned also about a fulat that they have some kind of American community going on over there. So I spoke to a family last week, and they said we're just plain people, regular people. We're not specifically affiliated with any one shul. We down sometimes here and sometimes there. Can we find that in Ramat Beit Shemesh, or do we have to be part of a specific shul, a specific community? What's available in Ramat Beit Shemesh in terms of the community structure?
So I think that we have an abundance of shuls, rabbanim, even the Israeli, quote unquote, Israeli shuls. The rabbanim are English speaking. Baruch Hashem, the Eretz system produces, Talmidei Chachamim and poskim, and as the most of the rabbanim in Beit Shemesh, the vast majority are British, American, Canadian. They're English speaking. Now, as far as do you have to sign up to one place? No, many people bounce around. I thought that was more a Eretz Yisrael thing to bounce around. In America, people are looking for their own community, their rav, their whatever. But definitely, you can bounce around here, and there's a lot of places to bounce around to and from.
But at the same time, we're also seeing that there's specific communities, and some people want to be part of those communities. Do we see that as well also in the new neighborhoods? Is that something that we have in
Yes.
the older neighborhoods, in newer ones as well?
Part of being on the city, I see the communities getting together and they're asking for designations of land so they can build a shul, so they can build their school. And they get together and they're anywhere between 50 to 150 families, in any given shul, and they're building in their ideal shul and their ideal rav and their ideal community. So yes, it happens in a big way, and I think almost anybody could probably find a rav and shul of the flavor that they're happy with. It's newer communities too. The newer communities, even Ramat Beit Shemesh Dalet and Hey, that are being built, shuls and rabbanim of all types.
So putting the different factors together, right, with the shuls and the schools and rabbanim and feeling comfortable in Anglo integration, we do hear sometimes people that say, we have family in Rehovot, or we have, we want to move to Karel because it's more affordable, or whatever it may be. Yoel, taking into consideration the many different factors of integration and a community and affordability, if you can recommend one, perhaps two communities for a family that's looking into Aliyah, but they're earlier on in the stage and want to see different options, which two options would you recommend?
That's a hard question. I don't know if I can answer that even, because each place has its own character and it's very unique. Just to throw out, for example, Ofakim, for example, has a name if I in 2 words, it would be Torah and Pashtus. That's like it's a very like Torah-oriented place and simplicity. And other places would be different. In Afula, in Givat HaMoreh, the Litvish area, which has some Anglo families integrated, I would say that it's a very patriotic place, and also very diverse within the Haredi community. So every place has its flavor, and therefore that's too hard of a question for me to answer. You really, I mean, there's Iman.
People have to come take a look. They have to do the pilot trip. They should take a look from close up and see what it looks like.
Yeah. I suggest in general, when people, when we want to see what things look like, I say the best thing is to come during the week, not only not necessarily on Shabbos even, like come see, for example, see the schools during recess even. I mean, this applies to Beit Shemesh as well. I mean, any place. You want to get your finger on the pulse. You want to go walk into the Kalalim, see what kind of people are there. See, in the supermarkets, in the parks, just to put your finger on the pulse, what kind of people are there, and see if you might fit in.
How important would you say the pilot trip is, y'all?
I would say it's not just a matter of importance. It's to realize what it is. You don't really get to figure something out until you see it, until you experience it. So you can make a lot of judgments, a lot of decisions based on what you think are facts, but it's an integral part of the decision-making process is to have the facts straight. So, and I think speaking on the phone to people and a pilot trip, that's part of that.
That's an important point you're making. I want to take it to another place in Ramat Beit Shemesh where this, I think, would play out directly. And Yona, you would really help us if you can make what we call Seder out of the Ramat Beit Shemesh confusion. Because we speak to people sometimes and they say, I was told Ramat Beit Shemesh is like Mashar, it's very Hasidish. There's different kind of Hasidim over there. And some people say Ramat Beit Shemesh is mamish like Lakewood. And others say, you don't know what you're talking about, it's Teaneck, it's Passaic, it's Baltimore. If you can make Seder, what is Ramat Beit Shemesh? Because we're talking about different communities and we're talking about the affordability, but Tachlis, what is it?
I would say everything you just mentioned is all correct and true.
How does that work?
So Ramat Beit Shemesh, right? The city of Beit Shemesh has close to 200,000 people now. So we have some Yasharim people, we have Lakewood type people, we have Baltimore, we have out of town, in town, any type of label you could give, I think we have here. And and the person has to be very careful what area they're moving to. There's, I found this apartment somewhere. I'm like, 1 second. You realize where that is? Is that where you want to be? Where do you come from? Many times I've spoken to people on the phone and they didn't realize, or they called to ask, where would they fit in more? So I think, correct. Anything you're going to say, well, I heard Ramat Beit Shemesh like this. Well, yes, it is to a certain degree.
But people have to ask the questions, be specific about the neighborhoods. And like Yoel said, you can make the phone calls, but you have to see it too. You have to know what you're talking about.
You really spend the time, spend the money. It costs a lot more to fix something that's wrong. Even if you love Ramat Beit Shemesh, you're not in the right neighborhood for you, and you have to move. That's also expensive, right, or impossible. So do it right. Again, with a lot of siyata d'shmaya, but putting your best efforts and your best ishtabos.
Right. So we're gonna end with another general idea. Yoel, we'll start with you. If you can share with our viewers, the people that are watching this back home, saying, okay, we're ready to get started. We know there's options. We know there's Ramat Beit Shemesh. We're hearing different things. How should they get started about
it? You can come from all sorts of different angles, but speak to people. Speak to friends that already made Aliyah. That's number one. Is just be busy with the phone. That's what I think. Or an email also. Online you can find information. I guess digging up information, and also speaking to people, because when you dig up information, you just see, text black and white. It's not the same as the vibe you're getting. One thing I would add is to get an impression about any specific place, you have to speak to at least three people three different people in the same place. I'm talking about you don't want to find out about one specific place. You're not going to get a good picture if you just speak to one person. Like a lot of people have an impression of a place because they have a cousin there, they have a friend there, and that's the only impression they have of the place. But it's very important to widen the picture out, to round the picture out, and speak to at least three people. I would suggest even 5 people in any specific neighborhood or community you'd want to move to, just to round the picture out and get a more accurate picture.
Yona, what would you say should be the way people want to do the research, learn about Ramat Beit Shemesh, specifically the different neighborhoods that you mentioned where it's important to get it right? How should they go about it?
So everything you all said, and then the next steps, come and see. As you all mentioned, not just Shabbos, right? Shabbos you get the shul, the community, but the supermarkets, the schools. Walk by the schools. Don't just make an appointment. Just go see recess in the school. Sometimes that's enough for you. Come on a pilot trip, and then always people run into issues. The timing, they think they're going to take an apartment in a month from now, but the Aliyah process takes longer. And that, you guys in the Shayach and Affordability know what those struggles are, right? Eretz needs to be Yisroel, right? And hopefully those are the Yisroel, all the paperwork and red tape, but plan accordingly to know when you're going to get your visas, to know your status. If you have a father or a mother or somebody that was Israeli, maybe you might be Israeli, as we discussed earlier. Different things like that, to know what the time frame is, what the goals are, and as they say in English, yalla.
Thank you, Yona. Thank you, Yoel. I want to share with our viewers that we discussed a lot of important things. Come see it, speak to people, make the phone calls. You can reach out to us at Shayach. We can put you in touch with Yona, we can put you in touch with Yoel. We have a lot of resources on our website. We have community contacts in communities all over Israel that you can be in touch with them, including the different neighborhoods of Ramat Beit Shemesh. Do your research, take your time, and Bez Hashem, we will be delighted to see you here soon. So wishing you Hatzlach Rabba. Thank you for joining us today. Take care.